When should you use screener questions when posting job ads, and when should you avoid it? This is a topic that I have thought a lot about over the last 10 years. After I've interviewed over 10,000 candidates, I am typically in the camp of don't use screener questions. I know they're very popular. A lot of people like to use them. And I think the main reason why is they get a flood of applicants and a lot of them are irrelevant. I get it, but that's besides the point. When you're trying to fill open positions and the market is tight, you're gonna get irrelevant candidates almost no matter what you do. So it's not about getting rid of these irrelevant candidates. It's about making your process as inclusive as possible, making it as easy as possible for candidates to apply. I'm such an anti-advocate of screener questions that I love the easy apply. I also don't like applications. I use applications, but I do those later in the process. And if you use them at the same point in your process, let's say after a phone screen, and you always do it at that point before the candidate takes the next step, then you're using them fair and equitably, but you're doing it once the candidate's engaged. The same point sort of applies to screener questions. So if you start using screener questions and they're very abstract ideas, like, what level of Java developer are you? You're asking the person to self-assess and give themselves a score on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 3 or 1 to 5. Look, first of all, you're not going to get an honest answer, right? In fact, you might even be disqualifying great people. You might get somebody who is humble and smart and really good at learning, and they give themselves maybe a 7 out of 10. Or you might get the opposite. You might get somebody who thinks highly of themselves, and in reality, they're not very good at Java, and they're giving themselves a 10 out of 10. Or maybe you're getting somebody who's just super desperate to get a job and they're just lying. So I don't also like to ask any sort of like culture fit type of questions. It could be very difficult to get real information or credible information from the candidate. Again, you're asking a leading type question, like, are you a team player? Yes or no? Like, what do you think somebody's gonna say? Like, no, I'm not a team player? It's a pointless question to be asking. When do I support using screener questions? We actually do support screener questions in our performance hiring software, Discovered, because it is necessary. It does have its use case. And one of the best places to use it is when you have very, very high volumes of applicants. Now, in most cases, in most job openings in the current market, that is almost non-existent. There's not enough people applying to these jobs, right? So the few cases that I do see that is when I'm hiring offshore, I do tend to get a lot of applicants and it can be overwhelming. So the cases where I see that might be certain types of credentialing. Now, when you're talking lower level jobs, you're talking about things like, do you have a valid driver's license? And I would not ask, can you pass a drug test? That just, again, is a type of question that somebody's going to say yes to. It's just a pointless question to be asking. But a valid driver's license is something they can't cheat on. It's a requirement for the job. It could be a certain kind of degree. Must have a degree in computer science, or must be an RN, not an LVN. Or maybe you have different options, RN, LVN, and that allows you to then filter candidates and put them into the right bucket. But maybe another example would be willingness to travel 75% of the time. And again, that is another tricky question, because you could ask that question up front only to come to find out that this person is not willing to travel 75% of the time. So another place where I don't want to use screener questions is when the talent pool or the talent market is super, super tight. For example, if you're going to hire a CPA, sure, you might put a requirement of must have a CPA license in there, but you also might be willing to entertain people of EAs, or you might even be able to be willing to entertain somebody who has extensive 10 years of experience of doing tax preparation, and they may not be a CPA, but that level of experience could be acceptable if they're a good culture fit and they actually understand the job because they've got 10 years of tax prep. If it's not absolutely required for the job, then don't put it in there. You're limiting your opportunities to look at people who could be high potential candidates. So how much value does that really offer in the process? In fact, for really good candidates, it's just creating more friction to collecting a resume of a high potential person. And again, my fundamental reason for avoiding screening questions is I want to reduce the amount of friction in the hiring process at all times. There are very, very few questions where I am a huge proponent of using screener questions. It's got to be a true deal breaker that's easy to measure on the back end of that has very little subjectivity to it. It could be some sort of free-form comment, tell me about yourself, tell me about your background, tell me about your most significant accomplishment. I'm only going to use a question like that in a circumstance where I'm just literally flooded. And flooded would mean hundreds, if not thousands of applicants. Typically, I think you need roughly 50 to 200 applicants to find an A player. Many of you guys, your eyes are going to roll. You're going to be like, I don't want time for that. But of course you do. When you have a tool like Discover, which is using AI to help you evaluate candidates or making it easy for you to review resumes and skim through and to reach out to people in mass and to automate a lot of the hiring process, dealing with 200 applicants in a 30-day period is really a pretty easy task. It's like 5 minutes a day of work. Hey, if this video you totally disagree with, I bet you there's some people out there that are gonna totally think that I'm crazy for saying this. Go ahead, throw your comments in there. Let's have a great discussion about when and why or how you should be using screener questions. Or hit subscribe, you're gonna get more of our content, and we look forward to seeing you in our next videos.